President Donald Trump is turning up the heat on Nigeria today, ordering the U.S. military to prepare for action against Islamist militants, threatening to cut aid unless the government now steps in to protect Christians. For more, we're joined by Oz Sultan from the United States from Sultan Interactive Group. Oz, what exactly has President Trump ordered the U.S. military to do in Nigeria and why?
So right now it's just a buildup of advisors and looking at the issue at hand, which is the abject ethnic cleansing that seems to be going on the ground. It's worthwhile mentioning that this is both Muslims and Christians, but there's a larger preponderance of Christians that are being targeted. This is also sort of the first time that inside of the number of conflicts that we've had across the region, the President Trump has kind of come out and spoken loudly about this. But given the State Department's focus on persecuted Christians, this isn't surprising.
If we have a look at the tweet that the president put out, or the Truth Social, I think it's called, The Truth, he says, if the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria, may very well go into that now disgraced country. Guns are blazing to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities. I'm hereby instructing our Department of War to prepare for possible actions. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious and sweet. Guns are blazing. How serious a threat is that from a president who, well, has told us that he doesn't want to start wars overseas?
I think it's reasonably serious. I think, what we have to be looking at here is they are looking at a surgical incursion, not a overt war, not a long-term war. So they're looking at potentially taking out the leadership of some of these groups. It's also worth noting that inside of the entire ecosystem, what we're dealing with, you've got Abu Sayyaf, you've got Boko Haram, you've got Al-Qaeda, you've also got localized militants, and you've got ongoing sectarian conflict inside of Nigeria. So this isn't really an easy issue to unpack. At the same point in time, one has to ask the question, if we go in there with surgical strikes, does that really stop things, or are we just, temporarily pausing things, looking for a larger solution?
What's behind Trump's claim that Christians are being targeted? What do we know?
Yeah, I have business partners actually in the northern part of Nigeria. And this is inside of the crypto community. But the sad part of this is that we have credible reports that you've got villages. So the challenge you have with Nigeria is that there's pockets of Christians, there's pockets of Muslims, and then there's a lot of integration in places like Lagos, that sort of a thing. You've got cleansing that's going on to the north, right? And this is inside of an arena where you've got multiple segments of ethnic cleansing going on in Africa at this juncture. Sudan, Mali, just to name a few. But I think this could be the most serious buildup that we've had in some very long time. More, I would say, honestly, almost 20 years, since the beginning of the Gulf War.
What's the reaction been in the States to Trump's comments on social media?
It's interesting. Nicki Minaj had come out, and again, not someone you expect to be commenting on politics, but was very positive for the support of Christians and persecuted Christians. We've also had people on multiple sides talking about, why not Gaza? Why not Ukraine? Why not Sudan? Why not Mali? Why not even what is it right now? There was a Gen Z overthrow, and I'm totally cancer braining on this one. Not Zanzibar, but it's Madagascar. It's why not any of these things, right? So, but I do think that this is something that Pam Pryor had been focused in on the first Trump administration inside of the State Department, and this is something that President Trump is continuing. So this is, important, I think, number one, for setting the stage with Islamists in Africa, but number two, to start pushing back on some of the unchecked issues that we've had with, these terrorist groups for a long period of time.
What happens if Nigeria doesn't meet Trump's demands?
If Nigeria doesn't meet Trump's demands, it is more than likely that we are going to put some sort of a military presence in there, very much like what was done in Benghazi, hopefully with a lot more military support, not like what we saw under Hillary Clinton. But there's a lot of unknowns once you get into the ground. There's unknowns in terms of how they'll be fighting, if it's guerrilla type action, if it's going to be within cities. There's more complicated issues of what kind of artillery they have on the ground and how good intel is. And then there's the big question: if you just take out, the heads of the snake, does another Hydra emerge? Do you have additional leaders that pop up that are going to continue this? And that's what I think is the bigger worry here, is that something is done surgically, but the problem continues.
It's always a challenge indeed. All right, Bitcoin has taken a tumble after the Fed Reserve slashed interest rates again last week, sparking fears that bearish traders are tightening their grip on the world's largest cryptocurrency. Oz, your thoughts on this, because the Fed's latest rate cut trigger, what has it done? Is it linked to Bitcoin's price drop, do you think?
In a degree, it is, and I think it's not just the price cut, right? So the Fed just printed $30 billion overnight. So we've had large Keynesian supply side economic push into the economy. At the same point in time, we've had a basis point cut, which is favorable towards short-term lending, I would say institutional lending as well, and it's at least keeping the mortgage rates down across the United States. But at the same point in time, it's a little bit of skittishness inside of the markets. And as we've seen, these types of impacts from Treasury tend to have some cascading impacts inside of the crypto markets. One other thing to point out is that a number of puts and options, so about 65 billion, matured, and then about 65 billion were put out inside of the October into November timeframe. That also cascades into, like what is a push down or a market pressure push down to 110K, which is where Bitcoin is roughly sitting about the time that we're talking now.
Yes, and obviously we've been watching, because usually the hope is that if people have more money in their pockets, thanks to interest rate cuts, they will be able to invest in things like Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Generally, but I think we're seeing short-term economic kerfuffles, and I think this is largely related to the tariff wars that are ongoing. Looks like we finally cleaned things up with China. That's great. But I think that, once tariffs go in place, you take a hit for a couple of months before you get stabilization and a resetting of prices. So what that's going to do is that's probably going to give us another flat quarter before we have a massive rebound. But the net of this, I think, is going to be probably largely positive for the American people, with a lot of these costs now being passed on to foreign countries and foreign producers. But that short-term crunch is something that economists have talked about, and something that is now impacting the crypto market to a degree.
And what does Jerome Powell's uncertainty signal to investors here, do you think?
Jay Powell is it's weird, because it's like a fickle sentiment to the market right now. It's saying, listen, we're going to go long in terms of rate cuts and stabilizing what we see as sort of lending issues. We're going long as well on Keynesian spending. We're going to go and print $30 billion. And at the same point in time, we're going to start putting out, federal repos on Treasury bills that are out there. All of this has kind of created some skittishness inside of the crypto market. Your alts are pulling back significantly. Bitcoin hit 110K. But I do think that this could potentially rebound. October wasn't as Octobery as people wanted it to be, but we could have a decent November coming out of this.
And do you see, I guess, Bitcoin's price falling further? How low could it go?
I think, you might see an additional, I would say maybe 5 to 7% correction. So we could go as low as 105. But if you look at the hype cycle that was written by Michael Turpin, and you look at historically what has been going on inside of many of these markets, I think that we are more than likely for a rebound within sort of like a short order. The big things coming up are obviously, the election. on Tuesday. That I think is also, creating market jitters,
Yeah.
and also what's going to happen to certain major cities, right,
Yeah.
where you have the seat of economic power, specifically in New York.
Yeah. All right, we'll leave it there for now. Appreciate your insights. Thanks so much.
Thank you.